Greetings, my fellow free blood sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful land of enchantment, which is also known as the state of New Mexico. And today's date, Thursday, October 22nd, 2015. Yes, this is some interesting events that are happening around this time. Of course, you had the whole Hillary Clinton debacle on Benghazi. And I am going to be talking about that. I'll be like the main objective on this event. However, there's other goodies in here as well. And, of course, the hype and the hoopla, Bernie Sanders. Feel the burn, yeah. And bend over while I get in there. And, of course, insane McCain that loves to take benefits for the military and give it to the terrorist groups. A typical member of the Council of Foreign Relations. That's right, insane McCain. I got no grassroots nor any money. And, of course, other interesting stuff here as well. You know, pharmaceutical, and someone got harassed by being pulled over for having a cup of coffee that's happening somewhere in Minnesota. And, of course, global domestic terrorism in the United States. Remember, the war on terror is a conflagration with ourselves. So deal with it, what they say, because we're the government, we know better than you. And it's okay for us to be an empire, and all hail to the New World Order. But first, I want to talk about a good colleague of mine, Felix Torres. This is on the Felix Cancer Treatment Support Fund. This is update number 8. I know I haven't really been consistent, but it has to be known. All right, and I could thank Devora Torres for putting this out. That's the husband of the wife of Felix himself. And it says here, "Hi everyone. So we are nearing the end of week 5. As far as we know, we have 2 more weeks of radiation. Then we will evaluate treatment and see how he's responding. The chemo will continue every day like before. Next week, the doctors are giving Felix a radiation boost, where they increase the dose of radiation to his brain for at least 2 weeks of radiation therapy." That sounds creepy to me, and I guess we'll have to see how that goes. The radiation causes brain swelling anyway, but an increase could mean more seizures, nausea, vomiting, exhaustion, and burns for Felix. His hair started falling out in large patches this week. We just shaved it off. No need to watch it go piece by piece. It was thinning anyway, but that pales in comparison to the burns and the other side effects of the chemotherapy. We'll take it. We had bad news this week about our son's developmental issues. Sorry and respectfully, details will not be shared on public venue like this. He is a child. Still, it adds on and is exhausting. Just again, want to thank all of you for sharing, donating, and helping. We are very grateful to you. This is a short update, and it's been a tiring week. It's for us all. Sign off with love, the Torres family. And, just to let you folks know, they raised $4,095, 50 people in 1 month. And I'd like to thank everyone for putting their funds in. I think it's fantastic. We're just a bunch of little folks that care for one another. Remember that. And I'm not going to say any names, but I am going to put this up. Everything I'm going to be addressing will be on my footnotes. So just to let you folks know, on my Spreaker page to be exact. And if you do that, it'd be great. Share it to everyone you know. Share it to Facebook, Twitter, don't matter. And this is why I wanted to see Mr. Torres in a full recovery, and everyone else who is suffering from cancer as well, including Howard Davis Jr. from Fight Time Promotions. He go to, I think it's fighttimepromotions.com, and they give you the link in there as well. And he's a great man, great honorable person, promoter. He was an Olympic boxer too in 1976 at Montreal with the great lineup of gold medal winners, including Sugar Ray Leonard and Leon Spinks, just to give you a couple. So, everyone's going to be talking about the whole Benghazi hearing, and it looks like some claim like it's a partisan issue. The Republicans are attacking Hillary Clinton. I'm like, good grief. If it was someone like Insane McCain in there, George W. Bush, those same individuals will be foaming at the mouth like Cujo Dog. Let's get these Republican bastards because we're the chosen one. And don't worry, the Republican Party thinks they're the chosen one themselves. So I'm saying it's all out of sarcasm. However, let's just read maybe a couple articles in here about this. Let's just read the editorial from the Washington Times, and it's entitled Congress's Failed Benghazi Responsibility. And of course, you see, the chairman was Trey Gordy, Republican of South Carolina, and on the left, his committee's ranking members were Representative Elijah Cummings, Democrat from Maryland, which he was like really bending over for Hillary, being so emotional, saying it's a partisan issue, and Hillary Clinton was smiling like, yeah, that's my boy. But we'll just read what this editor has to say. It goes, the tragedy in Benghazi is a profound public issue. 4 Americans' lives were squandered. A sovereign but woeful, unprotected American diplomatic station on foreign soil was attacked by terrorists. The American people were sold at a false narrative, a lie in plain English, for weeks about the true nature of the attack. Government officials who some inexplicably still collect paychecks, failed miserably to protect Americans who were serving their country in hostile territory. The newspaper assigned more than a dozen reporters to expose lies in that narrative over the last 3 years, bringing to light facts the Obama spin machine tried mightily to suppress. Congress subsequently allocated $5 million to empower a House-selected committee to find out what really happened in Benghazi. The Democrats have worked hard to portray the Benghazi inquiry as a political sham unworthy of official oversight. The Democrats are profoundly wrong. But after observing hours of the committee grilling Hillary Rodham Clinton on Thursday in a long-awaited hearing, we reluctantly conclude that the committee has so far failed to do the job. The committee jumped from issue to issue, devolved into bickering that Hillary Clinton cackling with laughter, and failed to provide a consistent and compelling assessment of what happened. The public is still in the dark. There is much to care about the Benghazi tragedy, but Chairman Trey Gowdy did a little to reinforce that idea on Thursday. He seemed unnecessarily defensive, intimidated by the Democrats, and fearful of how the media would cover the hearing, shifting the blame for the unanswered questions and inadequacy of the earlier inquiry. He lost control of the proceeding to Democrats clowning, often taking the bait, rather than stayed focused on the questions that would have told the public why it should care about the tragedy and the government's shame in Benghazi. The family of victims sitting in the front row left with their questions still unanswered. Representative Jim Gordon divulged one of the most important findings of the day when he revealed that Mrs. Clinton told her family about what the government actually knew, that it was a terrorist attack tied to Al-Qaeda, not outrage over an obscure video. She was not pressed to explain why the American people got only the story the White House and the State Department knew was a lie. Neither did the public get an adequate measure of why the tragedy occurred, why the public was lied to, and whether anything has been done since to repel such attacks today. Congress over the decades has provided an epic and valuable oversight from Watergate to Whitewater, from Ruby Ridge to Waco, from illegal foreign fundraising schemes to the failures that preceded September 11th. The Benghazi hearing Thursday did not hit that mark. The House leadership, which when it is installed and settled, should press for a new way to conduct oversight. There should be fewer speeches by members tailored for re-election campaign commercials and better questions from the members of the committee and their lawyers. Mr. Gowdy, a former federal prosecutor, but his performance Thursday hardly demonstrated that. The hearing was undisciplined in time and narrative. Learning from this hearing, making oversight more effective, would be a way to honor the 4 Americans who gave their lives for their country at Benghazi. They deserve better than they got from Hillary Clinton the night they died. And they deserve better than they got Thursday from Republicans on the Benghazi committee. I was watching a great amount of live footage from this function, and I am very disturbed. Even when I believe it was Elijah Cummings, sounds like a bellboy defending Hillary Clinton, she's smiling, grinning, and nodding. Pure blasphemy, as far as I'm concerned. And that's why I can't stand these chumps in Washington, D.C. Unacceptable, null and void. They don't give a damn about them, as far as I'm concerned. I don't need any Uncle Toms and Aunt Jemimas in office. I need honorable people that start to have their guts and courage to call these people out. And I know Mr. Jordan did something interesting too with some of the emails that he got, and just did call her out in a few things. And I do have to say that even some of the past episodes I did talk about this whole Benghazi thing and some of the emails I've read, yeah, I am very convinced that Hillary Clinton knew what was going on but didn't really care to an extent. Just trying to make themselves look good. And one more thing I have to say, if it's by Elijah Cummings, you're just attacking her because she's running for president. Please, up yours, buddy. You're nothing for me but dog puke. You're just an example based on your ethics. However, I'm going to be another article here from townhall.com, which is by Katie, Palovich. Yeah, Katie Palovich. So it's going to be more about the Benghazi ordeal. And actually, who wrote the? Let me see here. You know what? It's no big deal. I'm just curious who wrote this. Who wrote the editorial for Feel Benghazi Responsibly? But you know what? That's okay. I will continue on. Will be Clinton claims she didn't blame Benghazi attack on a YouTube video. Katie Pavlik. Speaking in the front of the House Select Committee on Benghazi Thursday afternoon, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton attempted to claim she didn't blame the September 11, 2012 attack on a YouTube video. Where did the false narrative start? It started with you, Madam Secretary. Ohio Republican Jim Jordan pressed Clinton. I refer to the video that night in a very specific way. I had some thought to justify the attack because of the video. I use those words deliberately, not to ascribe a motive of every attacker, but as a warning to those across the region that there was no justification for further attacks, Clinton said. Jordan pointed out while Clinton was telling the American people a video was to blame, she was emailing her family, the Libyan government, and the Egyptian government about a terror attack. At the same time, the Obama administration was arguing the deaths of U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens, Navy SEALs Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Daugherty, and Information Management Officer Sean Smith were a result of a spontaneous protest that got out of control, not the result of a terror attack. We know that the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest, Clinton wrote to the Egyptian Prime Minister in the night of September 11th, 2012. Let's take a look back at what Clinton said in front of the flag-draped casket of the 4 Americans killed in Benghazi, and there was video footage for that. And as another one, not only did Clinton blame the attack on a video offensive to Islam, the Obama administration and State Department purchased $80,000 worth of commercial airtime in Pakistan, apologizing for the video. Exactly, it's all the video footage right there. It should be noted that the person who made the video was hauled off to jail in the middle of the night. Clinton blamed the video for the attacks. Obama blamed the video. Susan Rice blamed the video. They all blamed the video. Clinton's mincing words doesn't change those facts. And I have examined those videos, and Katie is absolutely correct on there. And even myself, I never bought the thing about the whole video of a satire of Muhammad Prophet. I saw the video. I wasn't really too enthused anyway. But the truth of the matter is, the main idea, the attack happened. One of the main things you can focus on, a downward point of view, realistic point of view, is blowback. That's right. When you're going to invade a country and overthrow their so-called tyrannical dictator, Muammar Gaddafi, expect to get blowback in your face. This is just a fact. And this is why I never bought the whole thing about the video, the YouTube video. And Hillary Clinton made that claim statement too when I'm watching these past footages as well. But however, in townhall.com, they have all these videos as well, so you can really examine these and make your own judgment. But this is why I am not a Hillary Clinton supporter. I didn't even care for the woman about almost 23 years when I first heard about her, when her husband was running for president, and they try to make her like she is some glamorous queen, you know. But you know what? To me, based on her actions, she is just another Jezebelian harlot to the New World Order. That's just how I examine these folks. And you know what? I'm not saying I'm perfect, but this one I'm pretty damn spot on, based on their merits. And one thing I'm going to add too will be a couple of links pertaining to Benghazi by judicialwatch.org. One is going to be the New State Documents show quick White House efforts to link Benghazi to internet video. Okay, some documentations on here, which even Judicial Watch had to fight in court. And 2, documents obtained by Judicial Watch revealed top Hillary Clinton advisor knew immediately that the assault on Benghazi was armed attack, which came out February 26, 2015. So you check out some of the emails in here as well. And you might have to fight. Best thing to do too, if you go on to judicialwatch.org, look up for the Benghazi scandals. And I know there's one about, you get all the emails in here as well. But definitely check these out. It's very mind-blowing. And this is why one thing about Judicial Watch, they are, even though they're conservative, they are non-partisan. They go after everyone that's corrupt. Because even I remember the time when I was reading one of the most top 10 corrupt politicians of 2007. And what was funny, a bunch of people out there supporting Ron Paul, and you got a bunch of Huckabee people are critics trying to smear us. I read that to him about Mike Huckabee. I go, what do you got to say about your candidate? They couldn't respond. So always check out judicialwatch.org. They're a very good website. Donate money, be a member. You won't be disappointed. I got to take the initiative on being a member of this organization as well, because they're not afraid to put out the facts. They share it to everyone, and they are fighting for the American people because they believe no one is above the law, and they are absolutely correct. So, absolutely correct. So, all right, I'm going to be done with this of the Queen Hillary and the Benghazi scandal. And the next one here actually came out yesterday on October 21st. Which is by Kerry Wilder. It's entitled New FBI Report Debunks Mythical War on Police. Antimedia.org to be exact. And as it says here, throughout the United States, Americans believe there is a war on police. A recent survey found 58% of Americans agree with this sentiment. A new privately funded billboard campaign hijacks the Black Lives Matter moniker to read Blue Lives Matter, highlights powerful pushback from law enforcement sympathizers against activists. The FBI's 2014 reports law enforcement officers killed and assaulted, or LEOCA, released this week, appears to support the notion that police officers are endangered and unduly targeted. The number of officers killed by individuals committing felonious acts jumped from 27 in 2013 to 51 last year, as police apologists are all but guaranteed to point to this increase as proof their concerns are justified. A deeper examination of the data, however, reveals that police are not only safe, but still running rampant in their liberal use of violence against the citizens they allegedly serve. In 2013, the FBI reports that 27 police officers were killed in the line of duty. By 2014, according to new data, the number rose to 51, which, while seems like a sharply uptick, in fact, it nearly doubled. The comparison of its own is misleading. Out of 536,119 officers included in the FBI's 2014 analysis, 0.0095%, or let me repeat that again, 0.0095%. That's under 1% to be exact. Of the force was killed on the job, less than 1%. While this represents an increase from the 0.005% of officers killed on the job in 2013, the safest year for police in decades, neither figure skills are unrelated assault on police officers. As the Washington Post explained, when police advocates say that 2014 saw an A+% increase in homicides of cops over 2013, remember a few things. First, 2013 wasn't just an all-time low. It was an all-time low by a significant margin. Second, the 2013 figure was so low that even a small increase will look large when expressed as a percentage. Third, the figure for the following year, 2014, 51 police officers killed, was essentially consistent with the average for the previous 5 years, 50 killed, and still lower than any 5-year average going back to 1960. Fourth again, 2015 is on pace, 35 killings, to be lower than any year but 2013. The nature of the officers' deaths also provides insight into the war on police. Though the total number of officers murdered did increase from 27 to 51 from 2013 to 2014. The two biggest jumps came when officers were responding to disturbance calls or making traffic stops. In 2013, the number of officers killed during disturbance calls jumped from 4 to 11, while traffic stop deaths increased from 2 to 9. In contrast, the number of ambushes on police officers, premeditated actions attended to officers, only increased by 2, from 5 to 7. While this is nothing to celebrate, it actually constitutes a drop in the proportion of officers killed by ambush, the most intentional way to kill or wage a war against a cop. In 2013, 18.5% of all felonious deaths were a result of an ambush. In 2014, 13.7% of cops who died were ambushed. Perhaps most revealing, however, is the FBI's data on officers assaulted on the job. The FBI's list is a starting figure for 2014. Of 119 officers included in the report, 48,315 were assaulted, with 9% of all officers have been assaulted. On the job, it seems impossible to deny a concerted attack against law enforcement. However, that rate is lower than the previous year, 9.3%. Further, the data becomes much less daunting when considering officers who were assaulted and injured as a result of the attack. In 2014, 13,654 officers reported sustained injuries from assault, just 2.5% of the entire force. This is also a small drop from the previous year, which saw 14,565 of 533,895 total officers injured. That's 2.7%. There's an injury rate lower that of construction workers, who clock in at 3.8%. Further, these figures did not take into account instances where officers claimed they were assaulted but in reality were not. There seems to be a great potential for this discrepancy, especially since the FBI notes that assailants use personal weapons, hands, fists, feet, etc., in 79.9% of the incidents. Interestingly, both cases of assault and murder, the majority of the assailants were white. Interesting. Okay, interesting here. Alright, let's keep on. In 2014, of 59 perpetrators, 42 were Caucasian, while only 12 were African American. Two were Native Americans, 1 was Asian Pacific Islander, and 2 were unknown. In 2013, 15 of 28 alleged killers were white, more than half. The government's own data on attackers refutes another common media-driven falsehood that rabid Black Lives Matter activists are spurring attacks against police. Regardless of the facts, the FBI itself released this week, one overreaching factor should be cause enough to silence to those who lament war on police. Every single year, the FBI constructs its meticulous LEOCA report from thousands of police departments around the country, crafting dozens of charts and tables to break down and detail the manner in which officers died. The full report's here. Just to let you folks know, too, the FBI is very accurate when it comes to this report. So check this out. You'll be surprised, okay, on all the details and the statics and the percentages, okay? Just definitely check it out. There is currently no such system in place for regular civilians killed by police, though one community database placed a total 1,108 for 2014. In spite this depth of information on who the government kills, the federal government only took action this month to attempt to record police shootings and deaths caused by officers, even though this problem has crippled communities, especially minorities, for years, if not decades. In contrast, despite the ongoing intensive reporting by the FBI on police deaths, President Obama signed the Blue Alert Law earlier this year to provide for even further calculation and an analysis of threats and assaults to law enforcement. There is no official total on the number of civilians killed by police. While many outlets in the media propagate the narrative that police officers under attack, the government's own data speaks for itself. Though loud voices may decry police accountability, activists and millions of Americans concerned about police overreach. The FBI report only further justifies their outrage. Editor's note: an earlier version of this article noted an incorrect total of 54 total assailants when detailing their race ethnicity. It has been updated to reflect the actual number of 59, which are noted total figures. So this is really good, interesting, and this is why you have to always look at the facts, not to jump on the hype. And don't get me wrong, I don't like to see police officers get shot or get or beat on or anything like that, like any other individual. I don't want to see anyone's space is being violated whatsoever. And I know like I said, there was a police shooting that happened, and an officer was in critical condition in New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it's terrible. Like I think his name is I forgot his name. Good grief, forgive me on that, but this is horrible. So this is why you gotta look at everything across the board in the human element. Always be aware of these exploitations. So Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. Expect these infiltrators, opposition, controlled opposition, just to try to get personal gain. But the whole thing in the war on police proves that it isn't accurate. But the truth of the matter is, they will protect and serve the public at the best of their ability. Like I said, I don't go after the police as a whole. I call out the tyrannical elements in that particular entity, like everything else. Yes, I am an equal opportunity insulter, and very proud of it. But the whole thing is, you gotta always study these facts, especially the FBI reports. And you know what? The war on police is just a myth. But how I look at it, problem is they're being trained to see how many people they can arrest, be more aggressive to the citizens. Citizens still have to be vigilant and show respect for one another. Like I said, they're human beings as well, the police. And if you believe I support nationalizing it, you're talking to the wrong man. Talking about the wrong man, that's a fact. And like I said, the municipalities need to resolve the issues on a local level at the best of their ability. Always have merit. It can be done. Just takes a matter of time. Give people the truth. Share this information with everyone too. I do that all the time. So, but that's really it on this article. The next one here came from Activist Post. This one is entitled, John McCain leads the charge to cut soldiers' benefits, money for terrorists, but not for troops. While lawmakers seem to have no problem finding funds for bombs, fighter jets, and terrorists in Syria and Iraq, it seems that it's much more difficult for them to find money to pay American soldiers for their service and pay for their health care once that service is over. This is because congressional defense leaders on Tuesday announced they are looking to enact more entitlement and personnel reform in 2016. The bill being submitted and debated by Congress would provide a much lower than anticipated pay raise for U.S. troops beginning in January 2016. It includes cuts in growth of military housing, stipends, and an introduction of new co-pays for some military drug prescriptions and a scale down of the commissionary benefit. This bill also includes change to the traditional military retirement system and an overhaul of military healthcare offering like TRICARE. In fact, TRICARE reform is going to be a major focus in the coming debate. This comes after a Military Compensation and Retirement Modernization Commission report released earlier this year recommended dumping TRICARE completely, realigning medical commands, and better integrating Defense Department care with Veterans Affairs medical offerings. Pentagon officials, despite having an apparent limitless budget when it comes to funding bearded fanatics and providing limitless amounts of weaponry to terrorists, are now whining about the need to rein in personnel costs. Unsurprisingly, one of the most vocal cheerleaders of this effort to reduce benefits for American soldiers is Senator John McCain. Of course, he's a Republican from Arizona, plus a bend-over Bob to the New World Order because he is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, who stated that state military personnel costs are one of the greatest challenges and that we're going to have to make some tough decisions soon. I believe this man's going senile. What do you think, folks? No one should be shocked at McCain's position, of course, since despite his constant harping about his military service as a qualification for any and all of his opinions, McCain has been a relentless enemy of military personnel since as far back as the Vietnam War. It should be remembered that it was John McCain who stood in front of Congress and argued against any further investigation or revelation of whether or not American POWs are still being held in Vietnam, as well as displaying a general antipathy to American military personnel, as I detailed in my article, The Un-American Hero, Crimes of John McCain. There's a link for that too. As Sidney Scharnsberg wrote in his excellent article, War Secrets Senator John McCain hides, McCain was consistent, at least in his actions, in his refusal to allow any further attempts to discover and recover missing American POWs in Vietnam, as well as even the possibility of allowing any further investigation as to the possibility that Americans were being held captive. This is, of course, despite McCain's incessant reliance on his military service as some type of qualification for whether in his political position of the day might be. As Scharnsberg writes, but there was one subject that was off limits, a subject the Arizona senator almost never brings up and has never been open about his longtime opposition to releasing documents and information about American prisoners of war in Vietnam and the missing in action who have not been accounted for. Since McCain himself, downed a Navy pilot, was a prisoner in Hanoi for 5.5 years, his staunch resistance to laying open the POW MIA records has baffled colleagues and others who followed his career. Critics says his anti-disclosure campaign in close cooperation with the Pentagon and the intelligence community has been successful. Literally thousands of documents that would otherwise have been declassified long ago have been legislated into secrecy. For example, all the Pentagon briefings of the prisoners who returned from Vietnam are now classified and closed to the public under a statute enacted in the 1990s with McCain's backing. He says that this will protect the privacy of former POWs and give it as his reason for not making his own his own disbriefing. Many Vietnam veterans and former POWs have fumed at McCain for keeping these and other wartime files sealed up. His explanation offered freely in the Senate hearings and floor speeches is that no one has been proven still alive, and that releasing the files would revive painful memories and cause needless emotional stress to former prisoners, their families, and the families of MIAs still unaccounted for. But what if some of these returned prisoners has always been the case at the conclusion of wars? Reveal information to their disbriefing officers about other prisoners believed still held in captivity? What justification is there for filtering such information through the Pentagon rather than allowing access to source materials? For instance, disbriefing from returning Korean War POWs available in full to the American public have provided both citizens and government investigators with important information about other Americans who went missing in that conflict. Would not most families of missing men, no matter how emotionally drained, want to know? And would they not also want to know what the government was doing to rescue their husband and sons? Hundreds of MIA families who have for years been questioning if concern for their feelings is a real reason for secrecy. Others, however, suspect that all of McCain's insistence in keeping the information classified revolves around whether or not releasing the briefings would open the door to McCain's closet, suggesting that there are skeletons lurking inside it that the senator does not want falling out, Scharnsberg writes. A smaller number of POWs, MIA families, and veterans have suggested that there is something especially damning about McCain that the senator wants to keep hidden. Without release of the files, such accusations must be viewed as substantiated speculation. The main reason, however, for seeking these files is to find out if there is any information in these briefings or in other MIA documents that McCain and the Pentagon have kept sealed about how many prisoners were held back by the North Vietnam after the Paris Peace Treaty was signed in January 1973. Defense and intelligence establishment has long resisted the declassification of critical records on this subject. McCain has been the main congressional force behind this effort. The prisoner return in 1973 saw 591 Americans repatriated by North Vietnam. The problem was that the U.S. intelligence list of men believed to be alive at that time in captivity in Vietnam, Laos, and possibly across the border in southern China and in the Soviet Union was much larger. Possibly hundreds of men larger. The State Department stated publicly in 1973 that intelligence data showed the prisoner list to be starkly incomplete. For example, only 9 of 591 returnees came out of Laos, though experts in the U.S. military intelligence listed 311 men as missing in that Hanoi-run country alone, and their field reports indicated that many of those were probably still alive. Hanoi said it was returning all prisoners it had. President Nixon on March 29, 1973, seconded that claim, telling the nation on television, all of our American POWs are on their way home. This discrepancy has never been acknowledged or explained by official Washington. Over the years in Washington, McCain at times almost single-handedly has pushed through Pentagon-desired legislation to make it impossible or much harder for the public to acquire POW MIA information and much easier for the defense bureaucracy to keep hidden. There is also the case of the Truth Bill, a relatively simple bill which stated that the head of each department or agency which holds or receives any records and information, including life signing reports which have been correlated or possibly correlated to the United States personnel listed as a prisoner of war or missing in action from World War II, the Korean conflict, and the Vietnam conflict, shall make available to the public all such records and information held or received by that department or agency. In addition, the Department of Defense shall make available to the public with its records and information a complete listing of the United States personnel classified as prisoners of war, missing in action, or killed by action, body not returned from World War II, the Korean conflict, and the Vietnam conflict. As one might suspect, a Pentagon implicated in the abandonment of these soldiers thus vehemently opposed the bill. The bill was defeated in 1989. In 1991, it reappeared only to quickly disappear again. Although the interest from family members of the missing veterans as well as the American public had not necessarily waned. Another bill was inserted in its place, the McCain bill. As Schnabberg described, the measure turned the Truth Bill on its head. It created a bureaucratic maze from which only a fraction of the available documents could emerge, and it became law. So restrictive were its provisions that one clause actually said the Pentagon didn't even have to inform the public when it received intelligence that the Americans were alive in captivity. First, it decreed that only 3 categories of information could be released, i.e. information that may pertain to the location, treatment, or condition of unaccounted for personnel from the Vietnam War. This was later amended in 1995 and 1996 to include the Cold War and the Korean conflict. If the information is received about anything other than location, treatment, or condition under this statute, which it was enacted in December 1991, it does not get disclosed. Second, before such information can be released to the public, permission must be granted by the primary next of kin, or PNOK. All right, primary next of kin. In case of Vietnam, letters were written by the Department of Defense to the 2,266 PNOK. More than 600 declined consent, including 243 who failed to respond, considered under law to be a no. Finally, in addition to these hurdles and limitations, the McCain Act does not specifically order declassification of the information. Further, it provides the Defense Department with other justifications for withholding documents. One such clause says that if the information may compromise the safety of any United States personnel who remain not accounted for, but who may still be alive in captivity, then the Secretary of Defense may withhold that record or any or other information from disclosure otherwise required by this section. Boiled down, the preceding paragraph means that the Defense Department is not obligated to tell the public about prisoners believed alive in captivity and what efforts are made to rescue them. It has only to notify the White House and the Intelligence Committee in the Senate and House. The committees are forbidden under law from releasing such information. At the same time, the McCain Act is now being used to deny access to other sorts of records. For instance, part of a recent APBnews.com Freedom of Information Act request for the records of a mutiny merchant marine vessel in the 1970s was rejected by the Defense Department official who cited the McCain Act. Similarly, requests for information about Americans missing in the Korean War and declared dead for the last 45 years have been denied by officials who referenced the McCain statute. In 1996, however, another bill appeared entitled the Missing Service Personnel Act. The bill attempted to force the Pentagon to do more and act faster to find and subsequently recover missing military personnel. The bill contained measures that required very strict reporting requirements for these purposes. Shannonberg describes how McCain once again rode into town to destroy any potential that may have existed to discover existing missing personnel or any personnel who might become missing in the future, he writes. McCain amended the heart out of the statute. For example, the 1995 version required a unit commander to report to his theater commander within 2 days that a person was missing and describes what rescue and recovery efforts were underway. The McCain amendments allowed 10 days to pass before a report had to be made. In the 95 Act, the theater commander, after receiving the MIA report, will have 14 days to report to his cabinet secretary in Washington. His report had to certify that all necessary actions were being taken and all appropriate assets were being used to resolve the status of the missing person. This section was stricken from the Act, replaced with language that made the cabinet secretary, not the theater commander, the recipient of the report from the field. All the certification requirements were also stricken. How astute of them. Hooray. And it says here, in response, the backers of the original statute cited the Pentagon's strained record on MIAs and argued that military history had shown that speed of action is critical to the chances of recovering a missing man. Moving the bureaucracy to Washington, they said, was merely a way to sweep the issue under the rug. Exactly. The one final evisceration in the law was McCain's removal of its enforcement teeth. The original act provided for criminal penalties for anyone, such as military bureaucrats in Washington, who destroy or cover up or withhold from families any information about a missing man. McCain erased this part of the law. He said the penalties would have a chilling effect on the Pentagon's ability to recruit personnel for its POWMIA office. Yes, insane McCain. Schamberg points out how McCain has personally acted as the first line of defense against any who may suggest that POWs were left to their fate in Vietnam. McCain acts on the issue especially behind a carefully crafted but false veneer of patriotism and military service that appears to make him infallible in the eyes of many low information voters. Schamberg writes, McCain does not deal lightly with those who disagree with him on any of these issues or who suggest that the evidence indeed shows that a significant number of prisoners were alive and cached away as future bargaining chips when he came home in the group of 591 released in 1973. Over the years, he has regularly vilified any group or person who keeps trying to pry out more evidence about MIAs. He calls them hoaxers and charlatans and conspiracy theorists. Ooh, how manly is he, huh? Please. He decries the bizarre rantings of the MIA hobbyists and describes them as individuals primarily who make their living off keeping the issue alive. Before he died last year of leukemia, retired Colonel Ted Guy, or Guy, a highly admired POW and one of the most dogged resistors in the camps, wrote an angry open letter to the senator in an MIA newsletter. In it, he said of McCain's stream of insults, John, does this include Senator Bob Smith and other concerned elected officials? Does this include the families of the missing, where there is overwhelming evidence that their loved ones were last known alive? Does this include some of your fellow POWs? Clearly, McCain likes dissent the way he likes his veterans, silent. This silence for McCain can come by any means necessary. Indeed, McCain has been the biggest denier of all when it comes to the possibility that American soldiers were left on the battlefield, Schamberg states. McCain has said again and again he has no credible evidence that more than a tiny handful of men might have been alive in captivity after the official prison return in 1973. He dismisses all the subsequent radio intercepts, live sightings, satellite photos, CIA reports, defector information, recovered enemy documents, and reports of ransoms demands. Thousands and thousands of pieces of information indicating live captives as meaningless. He has even described these intelligence reports as the rough equivalent of UFO and alien sightings. In Congress, colleagues and staffers who have him seen erupt in open and more often in closed meetings profess themselves confounded by his behavior, insisting upon anonymity so as not to invite one of his verbal insults. They say they have no easy way to explain why a former POW would work so hard and so persistently to keep POW MIA information from coming out. Typical is the comment of one congressional veteran who has watched McCain for many years. This is a man not at peace with himself. Some McCain watchers searching for answers point to his recently published best-selling autobiography, Faith of My Fathers, half of which is devoted to his years as a prisoner. In the book, he says he felt badly throughout his captivity because he knew he was being treated more leniently than his fellow POWs, owing to his propaganda value as the son of Admiral John S. McCain II, who was then in Sinpak, Commander-in-Chief of all U.S. forces in the Pacific region, including Vietnam. His captors consider him a prize catch and nickname him the Crown Prince. Also, in the book, Arizona Senator repeatedly expresses guilt and disgrace at having broken under torture and given the North Vietnamese a taped confession, broadcast over the camp loudspeaker, saying he was a war criminal who had, among others, bombed a school. I felt faithless and couldn't control my despair, he writes. He writes, revealing that he made 2 half-hearted attempts at suicide. Most tellingly, he said he lived in dread that his father would find out. It still wince, he says, when I recall wondering if my father had heard of my disgrace. But how would McCain's forced confession alone explain his endless campaign against releasing MIA POW information? Some veterans and other McCain watchers have speculated that McCain's mortification, given his family's proud military tradition, his grandfather was also an admiral, was so severe that it continues to haunt him and make him fear by opening up of information that could revive previously unpublished details of the era, including his own nagging history. McCain's nagging problem, at least while surviving Vietnam veterans and or their family members, were more prevalent than they are today. What was the fact that there were actual witnesses to the evidence pointing out towards the existence of American POWs in Vietnam. Schasberg writes about the case of Dolores Epicata Alfon, chairwoman of the National Alliance of Families. He states, her pilot brother, Captain Victor Apodaca, out of the Air Force Academy, was shot down over Dong Hoi, North Vietnam, in the early evening of June 8, 1967. Interesting. That's the same time what happened with USS Liberty, right? Think about that. At least one person in the 2-man plane survived. Beeper signals from a pilot distress radio were picked up by overhead helicopters, but the cloud cover was too heavy to go in. And NOAA has recently turned over some bone fragments that were supposed to be Apodaca's. The Pentagon first declared the fragments to be animal bones, but now it is telling the family verbally that they came from the pilot. But the Pentagon, for unexplained reasons, will not put this in writing, which means Apodaca is still unaccounted for. Also, the Pentagon refuses to give Alfond a sample of the fragments so she can have testing done by an independent laboratory. Alfond's testimony at a hearing of a POW-MIA committee November 11, 1992 was revealing. She pleaded with the committee not to shut it down in 2 months as scheduled because so much of its work was unfinished. Also, she was critical of the committee and in particular Kerry M. McCain for having discredited the overhead satellite symbol pictures, arguing that there is no way to be sure that the distress symbols were made by U.S. POWs. She also criticized them for similarly discounting data from special sensors, shaped like a large spike with an electronic pod and an antenna, that were airdropped to the stick in the ground along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Other than the panel's second co-chairman, Senator Bob Smith, Republican from New Hampshire, not a single committee member attended this public hearing. But McCain, having been advised of Alfond's testimony, suddenly rushed into the room to confront her, his face angry and his voice very loud. He accused her of making allegations that are patently and totally false and deceptive. Making a fist, he shook his index finger at her and said she had insulted the emissary to Vietnam sent by President Bush. He said she had insulted other MIA families with her remarks. And then he said, through clenched teeth, I am sick and tired of you insulting mine and other people's patriotism who happen to have different views than yours. By this time, tears were running down Alfond's cheek. She reached into her bag for a handkerchief. She tried to speak. The family members have been waiting for years, and now you're shutting down? He kept interrupting her. She tried to say through tears that she had issued no insults. He kept talking over her words. He said she was accusing him and others of some conspiracy without proof and some cover-up. She said she was merely seeking some answers. This is what I am asking. He ripped into her for using the word fiasco, she replied. The fiasco was the people that stepped out and said, "We have written the end, the final chapter of Vietnam." No one said that, he shouted. No one said what you're saying. They said, Miss Alphonse. And then, his face flaming pink, he stalked out of the room to shouts of disfavor from members of the audience. As with most of McCain's remarks to Alphonse, the facts in his closing blast at her were incorrect. Less than 3 weeks earlier, on October 23, 1992, in a ceremony in the White House garden, President Bush, with John McCain standing beside him, said, "Today I am convinced that we begin writing the last chapter in the Vietnam War." The committee did indeed, as Alphonse said they planned to do, shut down 2 months after the hearing. Schasberg is no conspiracy theorist. It should be noted. He is the Pulitzer Prize winner from 1975, whose coverage of the social and political situation in Cambodia won him the award. Indeed, it was Schasberg's work that laid the basis for the movie Killing Fields. That was from the Pol Pot era. Something to really check out, folks. Great movie, by the way. Disturbing, but very good movie. It appears McCain's disregard for American military service personnel is yet one more thing that he has in common with his terrorist and jihadist friends in Syria. While McCain travels abroad in order to encourage and help armed individuals who have shot and will shoot American soldiers, he works tirelessly at home to ensure that those same soldiers can't afford the health care to treat their wounds. Unfortunately, in 2015, if an American serviceman or woman is in need of medical care, his best bet will be travel to the Middle East, learn Arabic, and grow a beard. This is at least if John McCain has its way. Absolutely abhorrent by this bastard piece of garbage, insane McCain. He is nothing more than a global Uncle Tom. Weak, pathetic, and you know what? Don't defend this man whatsoever. I am sick and tired of hearing people say how much of a great guy he is. He's nothing more than a chump. C-H-U-M-P. Chump. How the hell he gets reelected? I don't know. But I won't be surprised if the Arizona elections are rigged when he runs for office. Do yourself a favor, John McCain. Go up on the tallest building with a big piece of metal when a thundercloud comes over and become a human lightning rod. Because individuals like you contaminate space and hurt every single individual that served in the military, especially during the time of Vietnam. You're going to treat their heirs like pieces of garbage? How disgusting are you? You're not even a man. Nothing more than a two-legged piece of manure. I just sorry to say this, man, my friends, but when you follow these clowns for all these years, this is how you just get these reactions. And I'm saying this as a human. I'm not a human being. I admit it. But one thing for sure, this man is deplorable, treasonous. Benedict Arnold was more of a man than John McCain will ever be. And all you John McCain supporters don't like it, too bad. You can tell insane McCain I said so. It won't hurt. It doesn't hurt if he knows. Because deep down inside, he knows I'm right. And I can tell all my fellow brothers and sisters that serve in the military, you deserve the best treatment. You shouldn't be treated like numbers. Like this yahoo called Insane McCain, who is nothing more than a bend-over Bob to the New World Order. Plain and simple. He's another unmarriable stooge. Another example of what the clowns in Washington, D.C. are. All right. It's going to mellow out a little bit. Sorry for that, my friends. It's going to just kick back. And I'll be back in a moment. All right, I am back. I'll see what the next one here. It's from PaulCraigRoberts.org. Yeah, some people may talk smack about him, but you know what? I like his style. This one here is called Fate of Children in Armenian Police State. And this is actually, he says here, the fate of the children in the Armenian Police State. It says here, John Whitehead in the article below points out that American public schools are like prisons. The wardens of the schools focus on punishment and ruining the lives of children, not on education. Parents who can afford it put their children in private schools, and those who can't homeschool their children if they have the capability and do not have to work several part-time jobs in order to make ends meet. That the situation that John Whitehead describes is real. The schools today bear no resemblance whatsoever to the schools I experienced. The horrors inflicted on children and parents by the public schools tell us a lot about ourselves. While Americans wave the flag and mouth platitudes about freedom and democracy, they were rounded up, confined to a police state. The United States today has every characteristic of the Gestapo police state, except that the U.S. is more corrupt than it was Nazi Germany. The ugly reality of America today is beginning to dawn on some Americans. Those who have come into contact with the American police state have been brutalized by it, are forced by reality out of their matrix-like belief that America is the best and most free country on earth. Foreigners remained deluded by American propaganda and believe the U.S. is where freedom and opportunity reside. This is especially the case with youth in former communist countries. The propaganda image of America and the reality of American cannot be more different. We have lost our country. It is not here anymore. Public school students are the new inmates in the American police state. John W. Whitehead. Every day in the communities across the United States, children and adolescents spent the majority of their waking hours in schools that have increasingly come to resemble places of detention more than places of learning. From metal detectors to drug tests, from increased policing to all-seeing electronic surveillance, the public schools of the 21st century reflect a society that has become fixated on crime, security, and violence. Investigative journalist Annette Fuentes. In the American police state, you are either a prisoner shackled, controlled, monitored, ordered about, limited in what you can do and say, your life not your own, or a prison bureaucrat, police officer, judge, jailer, spy, profiteer, etc. Indeed, at the time, we are all viewed as suspects. There are so many ways in which a person can be branded a criminal for violating any number of laws, regulations, or policies. Even if you haven't knowingly violated any laws, there is still a myriad of ways in which you can run afoul of the police state and end up on the wrong side of a jail cell. Unfortunately, when you're a child in an American police state, life is that much worse. Microcosm of the police state. American schools contain almost every aspect of the militarized, intolerant, senseless, over-criminalized, legalistic, surveillance-riddled, totalitarian landscape that plagues of those of us on the outside. From a moment a child enters one of the nation's 98,000 public schools to the moment she graduates, she will be exposed to a steady diet of draconian zero-tolerance policies that criminalize childish behavior, overreaching anti-bullying statutes that criminalize speech, school resource officers, police tasked with disciplining and or arresting so-called disorderly students, standardizing testing that emphasizes rote answers over critical thinking, political correct mindsets that teach young people to censor themselves and those around them, and extensive biometric and surveillance systems that, coupled with the rest, assimilate young people to a world in which they have no freedom of thought, speech, or movement. If your child is fortunate enough to survive this encounter with the public schools, you should count yourself fortunate. Most students are not so lucky. By the time the average young American person in America finishes public school education, nearly 1 out of 3 of them will have been arrested. More than 3 million students are suspended or expelled from schools every year, often for minor misbehavior such as disruptive behavior or insubordination. Black students are 3 times more likely than white students to face suspensions and expulsions. For instance, a Virginia 6th grader, the son of 2 school teachers and a member of the school's gifted program, was suspended for a year after school officials found a leaf, likely a maple leaf, in his backpack that they suspected was marijuana, despite the fact that the leaf in question was not marijuana, a fact that officials knew almost immediately. The 11-year-old was still kicked out of school, charged with marijuana possession in juvenile court, enrolled in an alternative school away from his friends, subject to twice daily searches for drugs, and forced to be evaluated for substance abuse problems. As the Washington Post warns, it doesn't matter if your son or daughter brings a real pot leaf to school, or if he brings something that looks like a pot leaf, okra, tomato, maple, buckeye, etc. If your kids call it marijuana as a joke, or if another kid thinks it might be marijuana, that's grounds for expulsion. Assumptionist, kinda, sort of, it's the only way. Kinda, sort of, will get us through the day. Many states require that schools notify law enforcement whenever a student is found with an imitation-controlled substance, basically anything that looks like a drug but isn't actually illegal. As a result, students have been suspended for bringing to school household spices such as oregano, breath mints, birth control pills, and powdered sugar. It is not just look-like drugs that get a student in trouble under a school zero tolerance policies. Look-alike weapons, toy guns, even Lego-sized ones have drawn pictures of guns, pencils, twirled in a threatening manner, imaginary bows and arrows, even fingers positioned like guns can also land a student in detention. Acts of kindness, concern, or basic manners can also result in suspension. One 13-year-old was given detention for exposing the school to liability by sharing his lunch with a hungry friend. Oh my goodness, run to the hills! A 3rd grader was suspended for shaving her head in sympathy for a friend who had lost her hair to chemotherapy. Then there was the high school senior who was suspended for saying "bless you" after his fellow school classmate sneezed. 1984. Big brother, think for me. Let me go to the bathroom, please. I need to go. In the name of Big Brother. Alright, unfortunately, while these may appear to be isolated incidents, they are indicative of a nationwide phenomenon in which students are treated like suspects and criminals, especially within the public schools. The schools have become a microcosm of the American police state, right down to the host surveillance technologies, including video cameras, finger and palm scanners, iris scanners, as well as RFID and GPS tracking devices employed to keep constant watch over their student bodies. I'm just wondering if the teachers and the profiteers have these things as well. Making matters worse are the police. Students accused of being disorderly or non-compliant have a difficult enough time navigating the bureaucracy of school boards, But when you bring the police into the picture, after-school detention and visits to the principal's office are transformed into punishments such as misdemeanor tickets, juvenile court, handcuffs, tasers, and even prison terms. In the absence of school-appropriate guidelines, police are more and more stepping in to deal with minor rule-breaking, sagging pants, disrespectful comments, brief physical skirmishes. What previously might have resulted in detention or a visit to the principal office was replaced with excruciating pain and temporary blindness, often followed by a trip to the courthouse. Thanks to a combination of media hype, political pandering, and financial incentives, the use of armed police officers to patrol school hallways has risen dramatically in the years since Columbine school shooting to nearly 20,000 by 2003. Funded by the U.S. Department of Justice, these school resource officers, or SROs, have become de facto wardens in the elementary, middle, and high schools, doing out their own brand of justice to the so-called criminals in the midst with the help of tasers, pepper spray, batons, and brute force. The horror stories are legion. One SRO is accused of punching a 13-year-old student in the face for cutting the cafeteria line. That same cop put another student in a chokehold a week later, allegedly knocking the student unconscious and causing a brain injury. In Pennsylvania, a student was tased after ignoring an order to put his cell phone away. Defending the use of handcuffs and pepper spray to subdue students, one Alabama police department reasoned that if they can employ such tactics on young people away from school, they should also be permitted to do it on campus. Now, advocates for such harsh police tactics and weaponry will tell you that school safety should be the first priority, lest we find ourselves another Sandy Hook. What they will not tell you is such shootings are rare. As one congressional report found, the schools are, generally speaking, safe places for children. In their zeal to crack down on guns and lock down in the schools, these cheerleaders for police state tactics in the schools might also fail to mention the lucrative multi-million-dollar deals being cut with military contractors such as Taser International to equip these school cops with tasers, tanks, rifles, and $100,000 shooting detection systems. Indeed, the transformation of hometown police departments into extensions of the military has been mirrored in the public schools, where the school police have been gifted with high-powered M16 rifles, MRAP armored vehicles, grenade launchers, and other military gear. One Texas school district even boasts to its 12-member SWAT team. According to One Law Review article to the school-to-prison pipeline, many school districts have formed their own police departments, some so large they rival the forces of major United States cities in size. For example, the Safety Division in New York City's public schools is so large that if it were a local police department, it would be the fifth largest police force in the country. Ramifications are far-fetching. The term school-to-prison pipeline refers to a phenomenon in which children who are suspended or expelled from school have a greater likelihood of ending up in jail. One study found that being suspended or expelled made a student nearly 3 times more likely to come in contact with the juvenile justice system within the next year. Not content to add police to their employee rosters, the school have also come to resemble prisons, complete with surveillance cameras, metal detectors, drug-sniffing dogs, random locker searches, and active shooter drills. Detroit Public Schools boast a $5.6 million, 23,000 square foot state-of-the-art command center at $41.7 million district-wide security initiative, including metal detectors and ID system where visitors' names are checked against the sex offender registry. As if it weren't bad enough that the nation's schools have come to resemble prisons, the government has also contracted with private prisons to lock up our young people for behavior that once would have merited a stern lecture. Nearly 40% of those young people who are arrested will serve time in a private prison, where the emphasis is on making profit for large corporations or American corporations above all else. Private prisons, the largest among them being GEO and the Corrections Corporation of America. Profit by taking over state prison populations for a fee. Many states under contract with these private prisons agree to keep the prisons full, in which turn results in more Americans being arrested, found guilty in jail for nonviolent crimes, such as holding Bible studies in the backyard. As the Washington Post points out, with growing influence of the prison lobby, the nation is, in effect, commoditizing human bodies for an industry in militant pursuit of profit. The influence of private prisons create a system that trades money for human freedom, often at the expense of the nation's most vulnerable populations, children, immigrants, and the poor. This profit-driven system incarceration has also given a rise to a growth in juvenile prisons and financial incentives for jailing young people. Indeed, young people have become easy targets for the private prison industry, which profits from criminalizing childish behavior and jailing young people. For instance, 2 Pennsylvania judges made headlines when it revealed that they had been conspiring with 2 businessmen in a $2.6 million Kids for Cash scandal that resulted in more than 2,500 children being found guilty and jailed in for-profit private prisons. It has been said that America's schools are the training ground for future generations. Instead of raising up the generation of freedom fighters, however, we seem to be busy churning out newly minted citizens of the American people, American police system, the American police state, who are being taught with hard way what it means to comply, fear, and march in a lockstep with the government dictates. As I point out in my book, Battlefield America, The War on the American People, with every school police raid and overzealous punishment that is carried out in the name of the school safety, the lesson is being imparted is that Americans, especially young people, have no rights at all against the state or the police. I'll conclude with one hopeful anecdote. About a Philadelphia school dubbed the Jones Jail because of its bad reputation for violence among the student body. Situated in a desperately poor and dangerous part of the city, the John Paul Jones Middle School's student body had grown up among drug users, drug peddlers, prostitutes, and gun violence. By middle school reports, The Atlantic, most of these students have witnessed more violence than most Americans who didn't serve in a war ever will. According to investigative reporter Jeff Deeney, school police officers patrolled the building out of John Paul Jones, and children were routinely submitted to scans with metal detecting wands. All the windows were covered in metal grating, and one room that held computers even had thick iron prison bars on its exterior. Every day, police would set up a perimeter of police officers on the blocks around the school, and those police were there to protect neighbors from the children, not to protect the children from the neighborhood. In other words, John Paul Jones, one of the city's most dangerous schools, was a perfect example of the school-to-prison, police-state apparatus at work among the nation's youngest and most impressionable citizens. When management of John Paul Jones was taken over by a charter school that opted to de-escalate the police-state presence, stripping away the metal detectors and barred windows, local police protested. In fact, they showed up wearing Calver vests. Nevertheless, school officials remained determined to do away with the institutional control and surveillance, as well as an aggressive security guards, and focus non-coercive, non-violent conflict resolutions with an emphasis of student-empowered relationship building and anger management. The result, a 9% drop in serious instances, drug sales, weapons, assaults, rapes, all in 1 year alone. As one fifth grader remarked on the changes, there are no more fights, there are no more police, that's the better for the community. The lesson for the rest of us is this: you not only get what you pay for, but you reap what you sow. If you want a nation of criminals, treat the citizenry like criminals. If you want young people to grow up seeing themselves as prisoners, run the school like prisons. But if you want to raise up a generation of freedom fighters who will actually operate with justice, fairness, accountability, and equality toward each other and their government, then run schools like freedom forums. Remove the metal detectors and surveillance cameras. Reassign the cops elsewhere and start treating our nation's young people like citizens of the republic and not inmates in a police state. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That's the way to do it, my friends. And Paul Roberts, that's why he really commends this article, and I don't blame him. It's fantastic. That's the fact. What they're trying to do with their school system, public school system, they're training them to be part of the Orwellian society. That's what's been happening. Even there's another book too, what's it called? The Rise of, I think it's called The Rise of Police State? No, I forgot the name of it. Damn. The State versus the People, The Rise of Police State. It was done by I believe it was Claire Wolfe and the late Aaron Zellman from the JPFO talked about this as well. This is why you always people gotta get involved in their child's lives. Be the rabbi, be the teacher, even the parents, the guardians. Even when I do this out in the streets, I'm like that too. Talk to the kids, talk to the college kids. I'm like a rabbi out there. Good grief. Gotta start teaching one another. Not treating them like numbers. They're human beings, for goodness sakes. They should have creative control, creative thoughts. A lot of these kids are probably in these situations. They all got great gifts, for goodness sakes. That's why I like when they did the whole John Paul Jones school in Philadelphia, when they just say screw the whole police state tactics. Look what happened. That's how it should be. Give them a place to learn, enlighten. Teachers give them creative control. They should be treated as human beings as well, not bell patrons to the system. And I know he's snoring. That's my dog, by the way, if you hear in the background. This is how it should be done, my friends. We can still do it. Don't give up the fight when it comes to the children. Let them know that freedom is more essential than tyranny. You gotta get them deprogrammed from all the garbage and propaganda, tyrannical propaganda. Give them the facts. Give them light. Give them life. Anything can happen. Positive energies is inspiring. All right. Okay, it's gonna be sorry about that. Alright, next one's gonna be coming from the Activist Post again. Actually, it's by John Whitehead. Alright, this one's entitled Global Police, Pre-Crime, and the War on Domestic Extremists. And as it reads, are you afraid that the government is planning to confiscate your firearms? Do you believe the economy is about to collapse and the government will soon declare martial law? Do you display an unusual number of political and/or ideological bumper stickers on your car? If you answered yes to any of the above questions, you may be an anti-government extremist, aka domestic terrorist, in the eyes of the police. As such, you are now viewed as a greater threat than ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Let that sink in a moment. If you believe in exercising your rights under the Constitution, namely your right to speak freely, worship freely, associate with like-minded individuals who share your political views, criticize the government, own a weapon, demand a warrant before being questioned or searched, or any other activity viewed as potentially anti-government, racist, bigoted, anarchic, or sovereign, you have just been promoted to the top of the government's terrorism watch list. I assure you I am not making this stuff up. Police agencies now believe The main terrorist in the United States is not from violent Muslim extremists, but from the right-wing extremists. A New York Times editorial backs up these findings. Law enforcement agencies around the country are training their officers to recognize signs of any government extremism and to exercise caution during routine traffic stops, criminal investigations, and other interactions with potential extremists. The threat is real, says the handout from one training program sponsored by the Department of Justice. Since 2000, the handout notes 25 law enforcement officers have been killed by right-wing extremists who share a fear that government will confiscate firearms and a belief in approaching the collapse of government and the economy. So what is the government doing about these so-called terrorists? The government is going to war again. Only this time it has been declared against so-called American extremists after decades spent waging costly, deadly, and ineffective military campaigns overseas in pursuit of elusive ISIS and Al-Qaeda operatives and terror cells, including the recent accidental bombing of a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Afghanistan that left 22 patients and medical staff dead. The Obama administration has announced a campaign to focus its terror-fighting forces inwards. Under the guise of fighting violent extremism in all of its forms and manifestations in cities and communities across the world, the Obama administration has agreed to partner with the United Nations to take part in its Strong Cities Network program, funded by the State Department through 2016, after which charities are expected to take over funding. The cities included in the global network include New York City, Atlanta, Denver, Minneapolis, Paris, London, Montreal, Beirut, and Oslo. Congratulations, you're all a bunch of Uncle Toms and Aunt Jemimas to the One World Order. For the bastards, elected servants, the scumbags that you are, on supporting this. Working with the UN, the federal government will train local police agencies across America in how to identify, fight, and prevent extremism, as well as address intolerance within their communities, using all the resources at their disposal. What this program is really about, however, is community policing on a global scale. Global policing, which relies on broken windows theory. For policing, call for police to engage with the community in order to prevent local crime by interrupting or preventing minor offenses before they could be snowballed into bigger, more serious, and perhaps violent crime. The problem with the broken windows approach is that it has led to zero tolerance policing and stop first practices among the harsh police tactics. When applied to the Strong Cities Network program, the objective is ostensibly to prevent violent extremism by targeted source, racism, bigotry, hatred, intolerance, etc. In other words, police acting ostensibly as extensions of the United Nations will identify, monitor, and deter individuals who exhibit, express, or engage in anything that could be construed as extremist. Consider how Attorney General Loretta Lynch describes the initiative. As residents and experts in the communities, local leaders are often best positioned to pinpoint sources to unrest and discord, best equipped to identify signs of potential danger, and best able to recognize and accommodate community cultures, traditions, sensitivities, and customs. By creating a series of partnerships that draws on the knowledge and expertise of our local officials, we can create a more effective response to this virulent threat. Translation: the U.S. police agencies are embarking on an effort to identify and manage potential extremist threats, violent or otherwise, before that become actual threats. If you want a foretaste of how extreme things could get in the U.S., new anti-terrorism measures in the U.K. requires that extremists be treated like pedophiles and banned from working with youngsters and vulnerable people. The government war on extremists, of which the Strong Cities program is being sold to Americans in much the same way that the U.S. Patriot Act was sold to Americans as means of combating terrorists who seek to destroy America. For instance, making the case for the government's war on domestic extremism, the Obama administration has suggested that it may require greater legal powers to combat violent acts by lone wolves, such as people motivated by racial and religious hatred and anti-government views who communicate their hatred over the internet and through social media. Enter government's newest employee, domestic terrorism czar. However, as we know now, the USA Patriot Act was used as a front to advance the surveillance state, allowing the government to establish a far-reaching domestic spying program that has turned every American citizen into a criminal suspect. Thought criminal. Similarly, the concern with the government's anti-extremism program is that it will, in many cases, be utilized to render otherwise lawful, non-violent activities as potentially extremist. Keep in mind that the government agencies involved in ferreting out American extremists will carry out their objectives to identify and deter potential extremists in concert with fusion centers, of which there are 78 nationwide with partners in the private sector and globally. Data collecting agencies, behavioral scientists, corporations, social media, and community organizers, and by relying on a cutting-edge technology for surveillance, facial recognition, predictive policing, biometrics, and behavior epigenetics, in which life experiences alters one genetic makeup. This pre-crime of an ideological scale has been a long time coming. For example, in 2009, the Department of Homeland Security released 2 reports, one on right-wing extremism, which broadly identifies the right-wing extremists as individuals and groups that are mainly in a government, rejecting federal authority in favor of state or local authority, or rejecting government authority entirely, and one on left-wing extremism, which labeled environmental and animal rights activist groups as extremists. Hey, both guys got something in common. They don't like either of you. And of course, this means they hate the anti-10th Amendment. That's what Homeland Security talks about. They hate the 10th Amendment, so they want centralization. Hoorah, hoorah, hoorah. And all you folks still want to support the NFL when they have Homeland Security, want to pat you down like little prisoners when you go into the game to make you feel safe, which only is a total wet dream. Alright, continue on here. Incredibly, both reports use the word terrorist and extremist interchangeably. That year, the DHS launched Operation Vigilant Eagle, which calls for surveillance of military veterans returned from Iraq and Afghanistan, characterizing them as extremists and potential domestic terrorist threats because they may be disgruntled, disillusioned, or suffering from psychological effects of war. These reports indicate that for government, anyone seen as opposing the government, whether they're left, right, or somewhere in between, can be labeled an extremist. Fast forward a few years, and you have the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, which President Obama has continuously re-upped, that allows military to take you out of your home, lock you up with no access to friends, family, or the courts if you're seen as an extremist. Now connect the dots from 2009 extremist reports to the NDAA and the UN Strong City Network with its globalized police forces, the National Security Agency's far-reaching surveillance networks, and fusion centers that collect and share surveillance data between local, state, and federal police agencies. Add in tens of thousands of armed surveillance drones that will soon blanket American skies, facial recognition technology that will identify and track you wherever you go and whatever you do. So if you guys got to scratch your testicles, do it from the drones, okay? And then to complete the circle, toss in the real-time crimes centers being deployed in cities across the country, which will be all attempting to predict crimes and identify criminals before they happen based on widespread surveillance, complex mathematical algorithms, and pro-Nazification programs. Hopefully you're getting the picture, which is how easy is it for the government to identify, label, and target individuals as extremists. We're living in a scary world. Unless you can put the brakes on this dramatic expansion and globalization of the government's powers, we're not going to recognize this country 20 years from now. Finally, I make it clear in my book, Battlefield America, The War on the American People. The landscape has already shifted dramatically from what it was like 10 or 20 years ago. It's taken less than a generation of our freedoms to be eroded and the police state structure to be erected, expanded, and entrenched. Rest assured that the government will not save us from the chains of the police state. The UN's Strong Cities Network program will not save us. The next occupant of the White House will not save us. For the matter, anarchy and violent revolution will not save us. If there is to be any hope of freeing ourselves, it rests as it always has at the local level, with you and your fellow citizens taking part in grassroots activism, which takes trickle-up approach to governmental reform by implementing change at the local level. Attend local city meetings, speak up at town meetings, organize protests and letter-writing campaigns, employ militant, nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience, which Martin Luther King Jr. used to great effects through to use of sit-ins, boycotts, and marches. And then, while you're at it, I urge your local governments to nullify everything the federal government does that is illegitimate, egregious, and blatantly unconstitutional. If this sounds anti-government or extremist, perhaps it is in much the same way that King himself was considered anti-government and extremist. Recognize that freedom is never voluntary given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. King's tactics, while nonviolent, were extreme by the standards of his day. As King noted in 1963, the letter from Birmingham City Jail, as I continued to think about the matter, I gradually gained a bit of satisfaction from being considered an extremist. Was not Jesus an extremist of love? Love your enemies, bless them, and curse them. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, pray for them that despitefully use you. Was not Abraham Lincoln an extremist? The nation cannot survive half slave and half free. Was not Thomas Jefferson an extremist? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. So the question is not whether we'll be extremists, but what kind of extremists will we be? Will we be extremists for hate, or will we be extremists for love? So how do you not only push back against the police state's bureaucracy, corruption, and cruelty, but also launch a counter-revolution aimed at reclaiming control over the government using nonviolent means? Take a cue from King. Another great article from Mr. Whitehead. I remember reading some of the things too about from the Homeland Security on the whole extreme right-wing, left-wing extremism. That's why I always stress too that the war on terror is a conflict with ourselves, or war with ourselves, conflagration with ourselves. All right, I'm totally against this whole Strong Cities Network program. It's very New World Order 101, and this is why we gotta get the UN out of the United States. Use that building as one big outhouse because it was given by the Rockefellers. All right. Of course, Strong Cities Network program in New York City because the UN building's there, so it's perfect. But people in the cities like Atlanta, Denver, Minneapolis, Paris, London, Montreal, Beirut, also even New York City needs to start protesting these bastards. The United Nations is just an example of the one world government that want to believe your natural born rights are privileges. Remember what happened in Rwanda? They couldn't shoot back, and there's even claims that UN soldiers were slaughtering people in Rwanda, and even Haiti. Just look it up. recommend it. I know it has some articles in it, but I don't recall which one. But it was like New American did talk about that. They're pretty thorough. This is why I agree with Mr. Whitehead says. You gotta start on a local level. Like I said before, plant the seeds, not a no tree. You can't cry to Washington or your national capital. You gotta start on the local level wherever you're at, worldwide. So definitely, my friends, don't bow down to these bastards whatsoever. Because remember what Thomas Jefferson said. When the people fear the government, it's tyranny. When the government fears people, it's freedom. May not be perfect, but a hell of a lot better. Decentralization is the right thing to do. Demilitarizing is a very good example. Go to your local county meetings. Start writing letters to these people about this and say, you don't support it in your municipality. If you do, step down or we'll toss your asses out one way or the other. Or behinds. Be more polite. So, remember, my friends, they want us to butt heads and they can rule over us. And this is why we gotta say hell no to the United Nations and National Homeland Security, etc. Alright. Next one here came from RonPaulLibertyReport.com. About the man who people want to follow the hype that filled 25,000 people at some arenas around the country. Bernard Sanders. Bernie Sanders, that is. This is done by Chris Rosny. It's entitled Bernie Sanders Adopts a Dictator's Tone. And let's see how it reads. The man, the hype, Bernard Sanders himself. As it reads here this morning, a very anonymous tweet was sent out by presidential contender Bernie Sanders. I've got a message for corporate America. If you want us to buy your products, you better start producing them here in the United States. That's a very scary message on many different levels. First, it lumps corporate America together into one big blob that must obey politicians' edicts. There is no such thing as private property anymore. If there is no more free will, are we to produce what politicians tell us to produce? Are we to hire those who politicians say we must hire? Is a worker from another part of the world any less human than being an American? I hope that your answer to the question is resounding no. All but the cries will immediately stream from a democratic socialist that workers around the world are low-wage workers. So, Bernie Sanders makes $174,000 per year of taxpayer money as his salary. Where does he get his haircut? Does his barber have to make $174,000 per year as well? How about when Bernie is served by waiters and waitresses? Do they make $174,000 per year in order for him to dine with them? Then why is Sanders taking advantage of low-paid workers? They should make what he makes in order for him to exchange with them, right? Of course not. Bernie can make contradicts and trade with whomever he wishes. It doesn't matter what their skill levels are or they earn per year. The same should apply to people who are lumped together as corporate America. An employee contract is nothing but an exchange of money for labor performed. Corporations should not be allowed to contract with, employ, and exchange with whomever they want. It doesn't matter what the skill levels are, where they happen to live, or what they earn per year. Bernie has a problem with people voluntarily contracting with one another. Corporate America must make employee contracts with people that he approves of? Here's a good question. Should foreign corporations take Bernie's advice and do the same? Should they close up shop in the U.S. and lay off all American employees? Should they head back to their home country? Bernie's stance shows a complete disregard of voluntary interactions, freedom, and liberty. Sanders seeks to embrace force and use it aggressively against others. That's dictatorial and not the philosophy of a friend of liberty. If Bernie really wants corporate America to stick around, then the U.S. government must be peeled away like an onion. Layer after layer of red tape must be removed. America is a bureaucratic swamp, employing ever-growing numbers of apparatchiks. Jefferson wrote of King George in the Declaration of Independence, he was erected in multitude of new offices, and sent hither swarm of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Well, it has happened again, except this time the swarm of officers are homegrown. Sanders should focus on that instead of spouting out tutorial edicts that further erode whatever is left of our liberty. I have to agree with that. You're talking to a person with a German stagehand. I support unions the best I can on my choice. I like to see people make a living. You cannot ramrod people. It's like when it comes to unionism, you want to make sure you're working with the company's budget, not overpower it. Because right there, it can blow back on the workers. But what Bernie Sanders makes $174,000. Going to tell people what to do? He needs to shut his trap. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I disagree with everything what Bernie Sanders did. There are certain places he needs to wear a muzzle. This is why I'm very critical of Bernie Sanders in a lot of areas. He is not Bill of Rights friendly, for once. Let's look at his voting record. I know I did one on the Freedom Index I posted in the last episode on Bernie Sanders. He has 26% Freedom Index according to New America. He's very streaky too when it comes to war. So, the question is this. Will he actually stick for you? Uphold his oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic? I wouldn't really take his word for it, because based on his past practice, he is unmeritable as well. And I say that out of honorable context. All right. Next one here came from the Miami Herald. Came out today. This one's called Florida Death Row Inmate Becomes State's First to Demand Electric Chair. This is by Steve Baskowitz, Herald Times, Tallahassee Bureau. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, a prison inmate is demanding that he be put to death in an antiquated electric chair, and not by the lethal injection method that has been repeatedly challenged in court. Wayne Dottie of Plant City has been on death row since 2011 after he killed a fellow inmate in a state where condemned inmates routinely wait for decades to be executed. Dottie wants to die immediately, partly to attain spiritual freedom. Yep, okay. I think it's his goal to get put to death as quickly as possible, said Sean Fisher, a private investigator in Gainesville who once worked for Dottie. I think he's nervous about lethal injection being found unconstitutional. The Florida Department of Corrections did not anticipate that an inmate would demand electrocution. We received the inmate's request and were reviewing it, prison spokesman McKinley Lewis said Thursday. He declined to comment further. Execution in Florida has been on hold for the past year because lawsuits alleging that lethal injection is cruel and unusual punishment and thus unconstitutional. But the U.S. Supreme Court upheld its use And the next execution is set for next Thursday in the case of Jerry Correll, who killed 4 people in Orlando. Florida is one of the 8 states, mostly in the South, that have kept electric chair as a form of capital punishment. Tennessee reinstated it last year because of challenges of lethal injection. Florida's electric chair has been long known by a cynical nickname, Old Sparky. 3-legged chair has been in aisle for 16 years after a second-hand botched execution forced the legislature and then Jeb Bush to change the method. During 1997, execution of Pedro Medina, who came to Florida from Cuba during the 1980 mirror boat lift, a mask covering his face, caught fire and filled with chamber of smoke. And at 1999, the triple murder of Alan Lee Tiny Davis, blood appeared on his face and shirt as 2,300 volts of electricity coursed through his 350-pound body. The state Supreme Court temporarily halted executions but later ruled a 4-3 decision that electrocution was not a form of cruel and unusual punishment. The state switched to a lethal injection of chemicals that sedated an inmate and stopped the heart, but in changing the methods of execution, Bush and the legislature also gave the inmates one-time option of selecting electrocution. Dottie is the first inmate to do so. In a handwritten affidavit, Dottie wrote, "I'm invoking my right of free will to choose execution by electrocution due to conflict surrounding executions through lethal injection. As a boy, Dottie was subject to a physical and emotional abuse by his father, according to Dr. Clifford Levin, a psychologist who evaluates the inmate. The father whisked Dottie away from his mother when he was a toddler. By the age of 12, he was a truant and runaway. The record of the Supreme Court's mandatory review of his death sentence indicates that Dottie did not receive counseling that a child psychologist said was necessary." Citing Dottie's first-person testimony at the hearing, the court wrote, "He condemned the juvenile system for failing him and noted that you do not grow out of being ignored, rejected, neglected, abandoned, and exposed to the violence of watching your father beat a woman." He also said he would kill again without remorse. Dottie initially was sentenced to life in prison for the fatal shooting of Harvey Horn II, a watchman at a Plant City manufacturing plant, during a drug robbery in 1996. He tracked down Horn in search of methamphetamines. Dottie was 23 at the time. Sentenced to life, Dottie once attempted suicide at Everglades Correctional Institution, but he received no mental health treatment, court records show. At Florida State Prison in Rayford, Dottie was a runner who distributed meals to inmates and picked up trash and was considered a good worker. He and another inmate murdered a fellow prisoner in 2011, and Dottie confessed to the crime. Court records state that after the inmate Xavier Rodriguez insulted Dottie and allegedly stole a package of cigarettes from him, Dottie decided to retaliate. He handcuffed Rodriguez with a strip of a bedsheet and strangled him, and doctors said Rodriguez was stabbed in the abdomen 25 times with a crude homemade knife Dottie had wrapped in a newspaper. Rodriguez was scheduled to be released from prison this year. After his trial, Dottie acted as his own lawyer after a court-appointed psychologist concluded that he was competent to stand trial and to represent himself. Also at his trial, Dottie called a senior corrections officer as a witness. Lieutenant Dennis Cowenberg said Dottie was a good worker but was also perceived as a threat to inmates and guards. Despite repeated warnings of incriminating nature of such testimony, known as future dangerousness, Dottie allowed the officer's testimony, and the Supreme Court called it a strategic decision by Dottie. Dottie pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to die after a jury in Bradford County recommends the death penalty by a vote 10-2. Governor Rick Scott has not issued a death warrant, but Dottie has waived his right to all future appeals. The Department of Corrections says execution can be scheduled at any time. Dottie signed his affidavit on August 12, soon after the Supreme Court upheld his death sentence after mandatory review of his case, within a 30-day window to choose the electric chair. Dottie did not want to appeal to proceed, and he did not want his guilt to be challenged again. My decision of method of execution is a self-driven motive, allowing the state of Florida to exercise their duly sworn duties to deliver my sentence in a expeditious manner, Doty wrote, thus bringing peace to the victims' families as well as my spiritual freedom. Fisher, the private eye, said Doty learned the reality of daily life in a maximum security prison, where the threat of violence is constant. It is 10 times worse than you expected, and you have no hope, he said. It's very, to an extent, on his past history, it's very disturbing. You know, and I remember when Ted Bundy got executed, that was something else. But when you have someone like Wayne Doty say, "Hey, throw me an electric chair," because there's a lot of controversies too with lethal injection, because there's claims that it's imported, it costs money. I know Utah did that. Went back to the firing squad. They had lethal injection firing squad. Let's go back to the firing squad. And it was interesting, too, about this. Another gentleman in Washington, Wesley Allen Dodd, told the state of Washington, the correctional facility of Washington, to hang me. Because he's a habitual killer. Of course, the ACLU said it was cruel and unusual. They try to have concessions on that and go lethal injection, but he just said it. Hey, hang me, like it says here, almost in the the second to last paragraph, just before the hood and noose would drop over his head. Dodd said, "I was once asked by somebody, I don't remember who, if there was any way a sex offender could be stopped. I said no. I was wrong. I was wrong when I said there is no hope, no peace. There is hope, there is peace. I found both the Lord Jesus Christ. Look to the Lord, and you will find peace." Dodd expressed no remorse for the crimes. Outside the prison in snow, supporters and opponents of the death penalty demonstrated. When the witnesses reported after the trapdoor was opened, there was no sign of struggle or suffering. Members of the Near and Alza family and the media witnessed the execution. It's just an example. And I remember watching this on the news too. And he goes, "Yeah, just hang me. Because if they let him go, he's going to kill more kids." And it was so disturbing with this one as well, because based on his nature. When it says here, he was convicted, jury convicted Dodd for molesting and stabbing to death a 10-year-old William Neer and his brother Cole at age 11 in a Vancouver park in 1989. Dodd confessed to those crimes and to the strangulation of raping near Vancouver 4-year-old Lee Isley of Portland. Dodd kept a diary of his crimes, and he documented more than 50 acts of molesting children. Dodd was arrested after he kidnapped a 6-year-old boy from a Camas movie theater. And he did the same thing. He dropped his appeal and asked to be hanged because he deserved to die the same way that he killed his third victim. I'm going to add that to the memo as well with this, with Dottie, because it's very, you could say, coexisting to an extent about dying. So, it's like I said, it's really a shame. Like, even with Dottie, like, he had a real, like, terrible childhood, and that's very disheartening, very morose to hear. This is why I always believe in values, honor, integrity. Even my father had this Hell's Kitchen attitude, but he had his issues, but always cared about his kids, and I always commend him for that. That's why family structure is essential. Hell with the government. They can't even wipe their own behind. They can tell you how to raise your kids. You got to do it yourselves as individuals. Father, mother, if you're both alive, those are the things you got to take care of with your kids. That should be your one of your main priorities. We all got responsibilities. We have our imperfections as well. But don't let your kids enter the dark side of life. Alright, next one here. Be a couple from Personal Liberty. Last two to be exact. And this one here is entitled, making it easier for the addicted public to get its pharmaceutical poison. As it reads here, shortening the distance between consumers and the prescription drugs they can't live without has become the sort of white stag for the pharmaceutical industry. Telemedicine, a phone and internet-based service that enables doctors to consult with patients and prescribe them drugs on demand, is proving to be a lucrative trap to capture more patients' elusive dollars. Telemedicine uses technology to connect doctors and patients via apps, phones, and video conferencing. The Fiscal Times reports telemedicine revenue is expected to grow around 40% a year over the next 5 years, from its current $645 million to more than $3.5 billion in 2020, according to a report by IBIS World. The phenomenon has been rapidly changing healthcare delivery in America. FT writes, with patients able to simply discuss their symptoms with doctors with no examination or visit to bog down or delay their trip to the pharmacy. In fact, some pharmacies have installed self-service kiosks that patients can use to video conference with a doctor who could potentially call in the prescription while the consumer is still in the store, FT reports. Mainstream reports, like the one-sided it mentions the usual misgivings that emanate from the obligatory minority in the medical community, misdiagnosis, over-reliance on remote consultation as a substitute for real-life care, or slow adoption among the tech-adverse demographic of geriatric patients. But there's been not a peep from the medical community about how much easier it's getting by the day for doctors and pharma companies to shove more pills into people's mouths. Good confoundedly grief. And people are worried about firearms. How come they're not going after Big Pharma? This is total insanity, my friends. This is the leading cause of death. I think if I'm correct, it outleads alcohol now. Or tobacco. Or maybe both. I don't know. The rate things are going, that's going to be the leading cause of death. Prescription drugs. This is totally insane. Instantaneously. Boom, man. I just talk to them and assume. It's assume. Oh my goodness. I recommend this to everybody. Start changing your diets. Get involved in natural foods. Naturally foods, organic, non-processed crap. Get that out of your system, especially if they're kids. Make them eat healthy, because everyone needs a big chemical balance. These pharmaceutical pills, they're going to treat like zombies and droids or robots. Oh my. So I'm just totally mind-boggled on telemedicine. Damn. Insane, my friends. Look, I recommend you folks don't even get involved with this company whatsoever, because they will suck you dry. Remember, the Affordable Care Act, I know telemedicine is supporting Obamacare. Yeah, baby, ACA, all hail the fascistic medicine. Well, I say to hell with them. And finally, came from Personal Liberty again. It says here, take a sip of coffee, get pulled over. A Minnesota woman says she fully intends to keep drinking coffee while she drives a car, despite being issued a warning from St. Paul cop. Lindsay Krieger says what's happening to her is nothing less than police overreach and a complete waste of taxpayers' dollars. KMSP News reported this week. On Monday morning, she was pulled over at St. Paul. Officers saw her take a sip of coffee while traveling on I-94. Krieger came away from the encounter with a warning for drinking coffee, as well as an actual ticket for not wearing a seatbelt, which Krieger says she's happened to take it off when I was pulled over. Krieger says she had no idea why she was being stopped until the actual officer explained her offense. I didn't have enough time to merge up to the right speed limit. Yet, I wasn't speeding or anything like that, she said. The officer was like, do you know what you're doing wrong? I said, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And finally, after asking me a few more times, he says, drinking coffee. It's against the law to drink coffee while you're driving. A St. Paul police sergeant told KMSP that law actually backs up what the officer told Krieger. If the officer judged Krieger's coffee drinking to be unsafe, a distraction from her driving. It looks like the state of Minnesota and St. Paul, Minnesota, is saying, okay, guys, write many tickets as possible because we are broke. We need to get your pensions going, so write many citations as possible and have some deceptive rhetoric while you're at it, okay? This is what they're trying to train your cops. And St. Paul, Minnesota is just an example. Drinking coffee is a distraction. Don't get me wrong, you always got to be responsible right behind the wheel. But sometimes it just drives me crazy. And like I said, even with texting, you don't want to do that either. Always pay attention to the wheel, yes, but St. Paul, Minnesota, man, or Minnesota, you got some you're desperately seeking revenue. You're just another example. It's happening everywhere. Don't get me wrong. Even Fort Lauderdale, they're like trying to write many tickets as possible. Why, the city going damn broke? Give me a break. Come on, folks. It's time to talk to our police officers as peace officers rather than the deputies of Nottingham. And that's what one police officer said about distraction from driving. Well. What else do you want? Always be vigilant, my friends. And all I gotta say is thank you for listening to this episode. Plus, feel free to download and share this throughout your social media network. If you have any questions, comments, love letters, hate letters, criticism, or send me something that's interesting, but always use it with decorum. You can get me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, iHeartRadio. So you comments on iHeartRadio or YouTube. Plus, you can get me on worldtruth.org. Just finally just got it revived. I've returned to World Truth. So you can hit me there as well. Or you can email me at LokiLuck3, the number 3 to be exact, altogether at gmail.com. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.